Hello my friends, welcome back, or if you're new to this channel, welcome. I make videos about tree and plant lore, folklore and mythology, that kind of thing. And I'm making a special video today. It's about the sycamore, because a certain very famous landmark in the British countryside, the Sycamore Gap Sycamore tree, was tragically cut down by vandals last week. So I'd like to make a video about that, as well as some of the folklore and symbology behind the sycamore tree, and also a bit of a message of hope, because there's been a lot of anger on the internet, quite understandably, but I'd like to just give a little bit of a positive message which is actually contained in the folklore of this tree. So first of all, the Sycamore Gap tree. If you are from these islands, you might have heard of this tree. You might have walked past it. It's on Hadrian's Wall. So there's a walking route along Hadrian's Wall, and there's quite a famous sycamore tree beautifully nestled in the gap between two hills there. It's a really lovely spot. If you are from outside Britain, you may have heard of this tree or seen this tree already, even though you were not aware of it, because it is in the movie Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, with Kevin Costner and Alan Rickman doing his scenery-chewing best in that movie. It's a terrible, terrible and also brilliant movie. Go and watch it. Anyway, that tree features in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. I think there's a young boy hiding up it, speaking in an American accent and taunting the sheriff of Nottingham's men. If you remember that scene from that film. So that tree was cut down last week, which was obviously a great tragedy. I'm just making this video about sycamore trees in general now as a bit of a testament to that tree. I was not planning on making a video about the sycamore tree, I guess for the reason that it's not really native to these shores actually, and therefore doesn't have a huge amount of folklore surrounding it in these islands, but it does have folklore attached to it in other parts of the world. So this tree was probably brought to Britain in the last few hundred years, maybe a couple of thousand years. There's two theories on this. Either it was brought back by the Crusaders, because the Crusaders had seen it growing around the area of Jerusalem in the Holy Land, so wanted to bring it back as a trophy, as a sacred tree to Christianity. That would of course make its presence in the film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves a bit anachronistic, because obviously the film is set during the Crusades, so you can have a giant sycamore tree set during the Crusades. Anyway, it's not exactly the most anachronistic thing in that movie, so let's let that slide. The other theory is that this tree was brought to Britain by the Romans 2,000 years ago. That's very interesting then, to see this tree on Hadrian's Wall, which was also a symbol of Roman occupation of Britain, to keep the Roman Britain separate from the barbarian hordes, the Pictish tribes in what is now present-day Scotland. Another Roman import to Britain, of course, was the god Mithras, and there is a temple to the god Mithras just a little bit further along Hadrian's Wall. So interesting, these travellers from the Mediterranean to the same part of northern Britain, the god Mithras, the sycamore tree, and the Romans themselves. That's interesting, because the sycamore, part of its symbology is a tree of travel. So, like I say, it's not strongly related to the folklore of these islands. Some consider it a pest or a weed. It grows very, very quickly. It's not very ecologically connected to the wildlife of these shores. Not a huge amount of insect life lives in its branches, unlike this hawthorn here, which is of course a native tree and a sacred tree of Britain. So, you know, it's considered a pest by many actually, and it's actually very difficult to get rid of. It is a bit of a friend to humans though. It's because it grows in acidic soils. It's taken to the Highlands of Scotland, where maybe not many other trees grow. It's very hardy. It withstands very, very high winds, again making it very good in Scotland. It's also a very good windbreak along coastlines. Again, it can endure the saltiness of the air very well. It's a really tough tree. So that is, again, part of the symbology of this tree. It's a tree of enduring hardship. Okay, it's also a tree of protection. So in Christian myth, Joseph and Mary shelter under this tree when Mary is pregnant with Jesus on their way to the inn in Bethlehem. So they take shelter from a storm underneath a sycamore. So part of the symbology of this tree is protection. This is also a very important tree in ancient Egypt. As you can imagine, in ancient Egypt, there's not a lot of tree growth because the climate is very arid. So in Egypt, this was a very sacred tree. So for the ancient Egyptians, the sycamore was the tree of life, also the tree of death. So it was associated with many goddesses, with the sacred feminine, with the sacred mother in ancient Egypt. It was associated with the goddess Isis, quite famously, also the goddess Nut and Hathor. It's also associated with the sun god or god of the dawn, Horus, and also Ra. So in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is a book of how to navigate the afterlife, there are two turquoise sycamore trees, and the sun rises out from in between them, usually in the shape of an eagle. That's Ra. So associated with the birth of the sun and rebirth of the individual in the afterlife. So that is why in a lot of Egyptian art you often see sycamore trees, often with a divine goddess standing in them. There's a lot of this art in various Book of the Dead manuscripts, symbolizing the renewal of life that will come in death. It's also what a lot of Egyptian coffins are made out of. Again, giving safe passage through the duat, through the afterlife, through the in between death and a new birth. It's also, of course, what ancient Egyptian barges and boats would have been made of, because it was really one of the only woods available that, you know, to make a ship out of. Again, why it has symbology with travel, both travel physically across water to new lands, but also through the rivers of the underworld to a new life. Also interesting that Mary and Joseph sheltered underneath a sycamore tree, because she's, of course, going to be giving birth to the new life, to the son of the sun, that is, you know, the Son of God. So it is a sacred tree. There's just not particularly in Britain.
Just to reiterate this point again, the European sycamore tree, the type of which was cut down in the UK, it's a different species to the Egyptian sycamore, which is a type of fig. The European sycamore is named after the Egyptian sycamore because the leaves superficially resemble each other, and therefore the European sycamore has inherited some of those folkloric and symbolic associations, even if they haven't quite made it over to Britain in their entirety. So just wanted to clear that up, because I forgot to mention that in the video, because I'm a donut. Back to the video.
So this brings me back to the Sycamore Gap tree, and I think why there's a bit of a message of hope with this. Obviously, this is a terrible tragedy that this tree was cut down by a vandal. The police are still questioning various people. There was a 16-year-old boy questioned. Seems like a kind of mindless thing for maybe a 16-year-old to do. Also, a retired lumberjack with a grudge has also been questioned. But we've got no one's actually been charged with a crime yet. So maybe in a few weeks or months. There's a few reasons to be hopeful about this tree. I've already insinuated some of them. I mean, of all trees to shed tears over, the sycamore maybe, arguably, isn't one of them. It arguably shouldn't really be part of our landscape anyway. However, it was a very, very well-loved tree, so I would make a definite exception for this sycamore. But I've already made a point about this tree symbolizing new life, rebirth. This sycamore tree was already 300 years old, the Sycamore Gap Sycamore. Sycamores might live to about 400 years. By cutting this tree down, the vandal might have unwittingly been giving it a new lease of life, because sycamore, of course, coppices really, really well. That means if you cut it down, new shoots will grow from it, and it might even prolong its life. Other native trees in Britain we do this with are, of course, the ash tree and the hazel tree. We've been having this relationship with trees for thousands of years, cutting them back so they then grow again, often straighter and more more branches and trunks that can then be used for construction. And sycamore is a great tree for constructing buildings. So the point I'm trying to make here is this tree is going to grow back bigger and stronger than ever before, and is a real symbol of resilience that I really think we need right now, just in the world, because just the fact that our relationship with the natural world can be so severed in this modern age that someone can actually think it's a good idea to go and cut down a tree that means so much to so many people just really shows what a sorry state that our civilization is in many ways. But like I say, this tree is going to come back, and that's part of the symbology of the tree, both resilience and rebirth. Also, something on a more personal note. I heard about this tree being felled last week. It was a bit of an odd synchronicity or coincidence, if you will. I was literally reading about another tree that was cut down by a vandal in Britain. You might not have heard of this one. If you're from Britain, you probably have. It's the Glastonbury thorn. It was, because it's now been felled, the most famous mythic tree in Britain, connected to early Christianity and also paganism. The legend goes that Joseph of Arimathea, that's Jesus's uncle, came from the Holy Land, again another immigrant from the Holy Land, came with his hawthorn staff, here's a hawthorn here, and stuck it in the ground of the island of Avalon, the island of apples, the burial place of King Arthur, and it grew into a mighty hawthorn tree that flowered in winter, which is very rare, on Christmas Day. So a famous tree for Christianity, but also connected to the pagan worldview. I haven't made a video about the hawthorn yet, but I will. If you want to see it, hit subscribe. My point is, it was very weird reading about this tree and just getting a little bit triggered, and then hearing that another one of our famous landmark trees has been felled by another vandal. In the hawthorn's case, the Glastonbury thorn has been cut down many times, usually by religious extremists, usually Puritans that don't like its pagan connotations. The first time was during the English Civil War, then again in 2008, I think, and finally it was cut down by the landowner himself, and who wasn't prosecuted for this. So we almost have more, I personally think we have more reason to be angry about the Glastonbury thorn being cut down than this tree. So a bit of a segue here. There's a Buddhist monk called Ajahn Brahm, and he said something once very wise that resonated with me when I was thinking about our sacred trees being cut down. It was when the Taliban blew up some giant statues of the Buddha that are in Afghanistan, because again, religious extremists, to them these statues, rather than being things of beauty, were idols and had to be destroyed to please God. Ajahn Brahm had these very wise words. You don't destroy the principles of Buddhism by blowing up some statues. You destroy the principles of Buddhism if we, as humans or Buddhists or whatever, get angry at those Taliban. Damn those Taliban! That's what destroys the principles of, in this case, Buddhism. So applying that to these trees, there's been a lot of anger. There was a lot of anger about the Glastonbury thorn being cut down. There's huge anger on the internet right now about this tree being cut down. There's calls for people to be hanged, their feet chainsawed off, put in prison indefinitely until 1,000 sycamore trees are replanted. I think as human beings, whether we're Christian or pagan or agnostic or atheist or whatever we are, humanist, if we love trees and love the natural world, if we are angry at a poor ignorant soul that has cut down this tree, that's the principles that we want to nurture, that we're destroying, that we're cutting down at the root there. We need to forgive, and plant more trees, just maybe not sycamores, maybe some native ones. Thank you very much for watching, guys. That was a bit of an unusual video, but I just wanted to pay homage to the Sycamore Gap tree, and to all of our trees, sacred or no. What is a sacred tree anyway? All trees are sacred. So my friends, if you've made it to the end of this video and you are new, I make a lot of videos on tree and plant lore. So do hit that subscribe button, or watch another one of my videos, which I will play next. Maybe the first tree video in the Ogham tree alphabet, which is known as the birch tree. I'll play that video now. Thank you very much.